Okay, welcome to the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of Thursday, April 16th, 2015. The time is 5:14. May we have roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Garpetian, absent. Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Madam Chair Vartanian?
Here.
And Commissioner Vidor is absent. So 3 presents. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2 is report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, April 13th, 2015 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Number 3 is election of commission chair and vice chair. I'm going to suggest, if my colleagues agree, that we wait until Arlene Vidor is back, and because we just had our city council elections, new commissioners will be appointed, and we have 3 vacancies. So, and Jay, if that's...
And we may get reappointments, hopefully, but everything's in flux right now, so that would be best, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Fine. Don't mind giving up the seat at all. But okay, number 4 is approval of the minutes of February 19th, 2015.
I had one minor
yeah.
comment. Page 2, item C. If you could just correct the spelling of my last name and add in R.
After all these years.
Minor change. Otherwise, they were acceptable.
Michael, anything?
Nothing.
Okay, I need a motion and a second for approval, please.
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
I second.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Madam Chair Vartanian?
Yes, thank you.
Minutes are approved. Thank you.
Okay, number 5 is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. And I have 1 card from Sean Bursell.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Commission. I'm Sean Bursell, and I'm with the Glendale Historical Society. I wanted to make 2 announcements and then 1 other comment. The first announcement is about our upcoming Taste of Spain event, which will be on Saturday, May the 2nd, from 2 to 4. This is a members-only event, but if people who join the Historical Society by April the 25th get admitted to this event for free, so because it's normally $25 for members, and we serve wine and tapas, and we're going to have it in a beautiful home in the Ross Moines district, and it's really it's a real treasure, and people are going to enjoy this house because it's one of those houses that when the homeowners bought it, it was not historically appropriate, and they've spent a lot of time and effort and love and attention in bringing this house back to its original glory, and they've documented it, so people will get to see that. So if you're interested in joining the Historical Society and coming to our Taste of Spain on May the 2nd, you can go to our website, which is www.glendalehistorical.org. The second announcement is about our home tour, which will be Sunday, September the 27th. And this year, our theme is Mad for Modern, and we are going to be showcasing 6 beautiful modern homes in Glendale that were in various parts of the city that were built between 1950 and about 1963. So we'll be making further announcements at future meetings, but I did want to put that on people's calendars for Sunday, September the 27th. And my final comment, and I'm sorry he's not here, was I just wanted to acknowledge Commissioner Garpetian's service on the Historic Preservation Commission, and we're very grateful for his service, and he always was very thoughtful and proactive in reaching out to the community and getting input and making thoughtful decisions. I know he's going on to bigger things. I don't necessarily think better, because what could be better than the Historic Preservation Commission, but we do wish him well as he undertakes his new duties. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I also neglected to mention and to congratulate our former colleague, Vartan for his recent election to the City Council. And we will miss him here on the commission, but we know he's serving the community at large in more than one area right now. So with that, we'll move on to number 6, comments from commissioners.
I don't have any.
You stole my thunder. That was the only thing. I was going to congratulate Vartan. Same thing. So our loss is the city's gain. So we're happy for him.
Thank you. Number 7 is old business, and having none, we'll move to 8A, which is Masonic Temple, 234 South Brand, Glendale Register number 15, revision to proposed building rehabilitation design previously approved by HPC, and construction of exterior stair tower at south facade.
And before we introduce the project team, I just wanted to say that first introduce the project by saying we're very excited that we believe that there is a team that has the capacity to bring this building back to life. As we all know, the Masonic Temple is one of Glendale's great landmarks. It's been on the Glendale Register since 1997. It's been identified as a historic building officially since 1977. It's number 15 on the register, so it's one of the real early ones. And I think everybody has a certain love for this building. Well, not everybody, but many people probably do. And it's certainly a kind of the definition of a landmark. It's one of those unmissable buildings that we have, and we don't have too many like it. So the project before you is being presented by Crusoe Affiliates and their team, who are the new owners of the property. And they're on a very fast track to bring this building back to life and to bring some new users into the building, and they'll discuss that with you. But I just wanted to preface our talk by saying that the phased kind of approval process before the commission is not typically what you see for a design review approval, and it's very much based on a lot of the tight deadlines that the project team has in terms of meeting their commitments. And we accept that, we understand that, and because we don't want to slow down the process as much as we can, staff thought it was appropriate to bring this to the commission in these phases. What you're hearing this evening is work that focuses on structural issues, because those are some of the things that have to have the drawings, calculations, and approvals made at an early stage, and then that work can begin if you choose to approve it. And then at the next hearing, you'll be approving some of the more refinements of that design, including what the stair tower will look like, material palette, actual design drawings for that. And then you'll also be looking at new storefronts, new front doors, kind of some of the ground level details that will bring that part of the building back to life. And at a third hearing, assuming there are only 3, you'll be looking at very specific information about the tenant occupancy for the building, and we don't know what the timeline for that is. At this point, we're looking, and the project team may correct us, but the phase 2 work will come to the commission's meeting in May, if all goes as planned. And at that point, the building envelope approval should be substantial enough for them to move forward into plan check if the commission is inclined to approve the work. What I also wanted to do, just to introduce, and the project team may touch on this, but I just wanted to officially remind the commission where we've been on this project as a group. And the pictures behind you on the screen are probably a little more legible. These are drawings from the former owners who came to the commission in 2010 and then again in 2013 for approvals to rehabilitate the building. A similar project in terms of providing office use at the upper levels and some sort of retail commercial use, undetermined at that point, at the lower level. So similar scope of work. These are the existing condition photographs, and as everyone knows, the building has a very interesting kind of window pattern with the regular symmetrical front facade and the more haphazard side facades that reflect some of the internal uses that were important when it was a Masonic lodge. Which lasted for some time, but certainly the building's been vacant much longer than it's ever been used. If you look at the side-by-side drawings, this is the the south facade. In 2010, the DiPietros came to the commission with a proposal to alter window openings and add new window openings at the south, east and north facades. We'll just go one by one. At that time, they were trying to bring the commandery to its proper place as one of the great spaces of Glendale. They recognized the fact that it was windowless meant that they would need to cut windows. In 2010, the Commission approved these arch-headed windows at what we're calling level 7 and 8. In 2013, the DiPietros came back after they realized that some of their seismic upgrade work we were going to lead to the demolition of interior arches on the walls that kind of led to this form. The concept was once those arches were gone, it didn't make sense to have the arched window openings anymore. So they came back with these rectangular openings and then kind of a regularized pattern of window openings below. Again, on the north facade, similar. In fact, in 2010, the Commission approved many more windows than you might remember, with these large windows at the, here I'll use the cursor. We're calling this the second and third level. I'm sorry, the third and fourth level, the fifth and sixth level, and then the seventh and eighth level for these double height spaces. So there were a total of 12 windows approved with the large windows and then some alterations of some of the smaller openings. In 2013, the team came back with fewer window openings and again removing the arches at the upper floor. Less significant changes were proposed at the east facade, and you'll see the current project is proposing much more significant interventions at this facade. This really didn't change between the 2010 approval and the 2013 approval. And finally, I just wanted to show this section drawing that the DiPietros provided to you in the past. We may have to jump back to this if it helps explain things, but on the north side of the building, we have these ceremonial spaces at level 3-4, level 5-6, and level 7-8. And these were special rooms, and that's why they were largely windowless, and they were ornamentally decorated, most of which is gone now. At the lower level, we have the theater space where Noise Within was there for many years. This was also a movie theater for many years. There were several different uses over time. And then on the north side of the building, you see these kind of mezzanine levels with intervening mezzanine floors. If you visited, I think all of you visited the building, where this large truss runs through the building to support these large openings. The walls have been removed, so now we have visibility from the large space up into the mezzanines. But the mezzanine placement is largely responsible for the decision in terms of where the elevators have to go and consequently why the stairway had to be placed on the outside rather than the inside. And we'll let the project team explain that to you, but I wanted you to see the drawing just to kind of get this, the structure of the building in your head. And with that, we'll turn it over to the team from Caruso. They'll introduce themselves, but Dave Williams will introduce the project.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us. We're very excited to be here. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm Dave Williams. It's hard. Am I going to be controlling our PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Just giving you the power.
Okay. Oh, that's intimidating.
Just use the arrows.
I'm just going to practice one thing. Okay, there we go. That works. All right. So it's been roughly 15 years since we came to town when we started planning the Americana brand. And we've been a very proud member of the Glendale community since, and very proud to say we've been a big part of the revitalization of that part of Brand Boulevard, and we've seen a lot of change. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the Masonic Temple come back to life, and that's why we're so excited to be here today, because we have before us a project that we're ready to go on. We're ready to execute, and we can have this building reopened and occupied by the end of this year. And it's been a fortuitous set of circumstances that brought us here, but we have a great tenant, and that's the building we all know and love. And we have a great tenant, CBRE. They've signed an LOI, not a lease yet. We're still working through those issues, but they have a letter of intent with us with all intentions of executing a lease and occupying this building. But we are on a time frame because they have to move out of their current offices and be into this office basically by the end of the year. So as we know, the modifications under the previously approved DiPietro plan have been quite extensive, and they've moved around quite a bit, but they still haven't gotten the building to where it needed to be commercially viable. So what we're presenting today is what we need to do to satisfy CBRE's needs and to make the project work for a 21st century tenant. We also know, and I think everybody's walked the building recently, the interiors have been largely demolished. So whatever is remnant in there today is really out of context. And at a point in the future, we'll be presenting our ideas for the interior lobby. And we all know the building has been vacant far too long, and it's been a challenge for the city. So we're really optimistic about what we're about to present. So Jay covered already the history with the DiPietros. So what we have up here right now on the left is the original it's the original facade, but also the DiPietro facade. And we're proposing no changes to the facade facing Brand Boulevard. We're going to restore and refurbish the windows in place already. We'll need to reglaze them. But other than that, there'll be no changes to the building. We have a lead paint issue, so we'll be removing all of the paint on the building and repainting it to match the existing color. So that's an environmental issue that we feel we have to remediate. The north facade, this is, again, the original building, the DiPietro modifications, and then the modifications that we're proposing. Again, larger windows to support the commercial viability of the building and to meet the needs of our tenant. The rear of the building, again, on the left, the original building on the right, the DiPietro modifications, or one version of it. We know there's been others. And then this is what we're proposing. Again, it works structurally. It gives our tenant what they need, larger openings, and it has the great benefit of providing fantastic views of the Central Park and the mountains beyond. It really is a spectacular space from the inside with these large openings. And then the south elevation of the building, the original on the left, more irregular windows, the DiPietro, one version of the DiPietro renovations on the right, and then what we're proposing. There is a slight error in the rendering here. The top windows of the south elevation are actually properly depicted in the line drawn elevation, and the rendering is not accurate in terms of having the concrete transom. We would want to have the spandrel glass transom is depicted in the elevation on the left. This rendering, which is really of the rear of the building, shows that more accurately. And then you can see the stair tower ghosted in on the elevation. The design of that is in progress, and we'll be coming before you at a later date with that. I'm not sure what's... Yeah, we're having a little technical issue on this. Maybe we need to refer to the packets on this. What we're showing here is that the replacement windows, the new windows, are going to be this detail, which was previously approved in one of the DiPietro iterations for the replacement windows. And it's an aluminum system with a divided light, very similar to the existing steel system, but it's modern technology and the right way for us to go on this building. Oh, that's too bad. So in your packets, we have a rendering of the interior of the space that CBRE prepared, and one of the things that we all got so excited about in this project, the spectacular trusses that are on the top floor, the huge volume. This is not space that could be recreated anywhere else. And the only missing ingredient in this for them was large, expansive openings, views out, and sunlight coming in. Then if you turn to the next, I'm sorry.
Let me just try one thing with the keyboard. If you can hand me the keyboard. I'm going to go back to we dropped this into our PowerPoint, so maybe we can. What's that? No, I got it here. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it just didn't transfer very well.
You go back to the one that was.
Yeah, we already, so it's the Windows section. So again, just a great space. They've, we think, done a fantastic job of marrying a modern design with a historic space. And then this is the view looking the opposite direction. So again, this is levels 7 and 8. Although 9 is part of their lease area, it's not occupied per se. It's going to be used for IT and or server rooms, electrical rooms, those sort of things. But they're, as you can see, they're building this mini amphitheater at the end of the space. So that amphitheater, that stadium seating, faces out towards the Central Park. And one of the unique things about CBRE is they, in their current office space downtown, which they've occupied in its renovated form for a couple of years now, they've toured almost 18,000 people through that space. And they intend to do the same thing here. They're going to be occupying a landmark, living in this landmark, and it will be accessible to people to come through for tours. Obviously, this is a big marketing piece for them. They want people to come in, see their innovative brand of office, and promote their open office plans. But we think it's a unique opportunity for Glendale for people to actually have access to this space. And that is the extent of my presentation. So with that, let me turn it over to John Lezak with Page and Turnbull, and he'll go through the historic.
May I ask
report.
one quick question?
Sure.
Did you say CBRE will take people through the building for tours?
Yes.
And they do that right now in their current building?
They do it right now on a professional basis, but I'm sure they'd be happy to accommodate private citizens on some limited appointment basis.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. In fact, one of the ways our relationship started with CBRE is I heard about their office space. I went over there for a tour, even though we're in the retail business. I just heard it was spectacular. So, they toured me and a number of my colleagues through. So.
Are they in a historic space right now?
No, they're in a space downtown. They just did a very unique free address open office plan, which was revolutionary at the time, and now it's being adopted because of the efficiency and the more collaborative nature of the office.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I have to apologize because I have laryngitis, so I hope that this comes across okay. If you get an opportunity to tour the CBRE space, I recommend you do it because it is kind of a mind-blowing experience. It really is something. My name's John Lesak. I'm a historic preservation architect. I'm a partner with Page and Turnbull. I have 25 years working on historic buildings all over the United States. I've worked as a consultant on the terracotta restoration of LA City Hall. I've actually rappelled off the dome on San Francisco City Hall looking at the copper. I've worked on the Wisconsin State Capitol, worked on the relocation of the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in North Carolina, amongst others. Right now we're working on the Hearst Castle, and we're working on the courthouse downtown, which are both national historic landmarks. I'm a fellow in the Association for Preservation and Technology, and I was a 9-year commissioner in South Pasadena, so I can sympathize with what you folks have to do. I was chair for 3 years, and I teach at USC with Mr. Platt over here in their Heritage Conservation Program, and part of my specialty is really sustainable conservation of the built environment. So how can we marry green building with historic preservation? Our firm is a 40-year-old firm. We're headquartered in San Francisco. We have about 40 people. We only do historic buildings. We have an office here that's about 9 years, and then we have office in Sacramento. But as part of our work in San Francisco, we've really been kind of catching the wave of creative office. And I wanted to show you a couple examples that are both up there and in the near packet. But on the left is Market Square, which used to be the furniture mart of San Francisco. And it's been rehabilitated, and it's now the headquarters of Twitter. I have fond memories of this building because my dad was a furniture salesman, so he would bring me from Chicago to San Francisco, and I'd roam around the endless halls. But again, it's a difficult kind of building because it was this kind of mart with big open spaces, and the rehabilitation of it really kind of brought a new life to the area. On the right is 140 New Montgomery Street, which is now the headquarters of Yelp. It used to be the Pacific Telephone building. Let's see if I can make this work right. On the left is Pier 3. It's on the waterfront in San Francisco. It houses Bloomberg's Western Region offices. On the right, the scaffolding is just coming down. This is one of my projects. It's the old Monognock building. It survived the earthquake in San Francisco in 1906. Now houses Uber. And lastly, this is 888 Brannan Street in San Francisco. This is a project, again, I worked on with Gensler. It was a warehouse building. And in the 80s, it was actually a federal tax credit project, and they created this atrium in there, and it underwent another renovation, 30 years later, and they've again created some of this creative office space, but Airbnb's offices are in there as well. So one thing to think about, one thing that we've learned through all these projects, most of these buildings were either significantly underutilized or vacant at the time that we kind of got going on them. And they were really game changers as far as the urban experience, particularly the Twitter headquarters. That part of Market Street in San Francisco is really dead. And now it's vibrant and live. And I think that some of the vibrancy from across the street will transfer when this building gets up and running. It'll really bring some life to Brand Boulevard. So we were retained to work with the team. It seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't all that long ago. And it's a challenging review. It's a challenging review for you. It's a challenging review for us. One, because of just the oddities of Masonic temple buildings. They really were kind of ritualized spaces. There was a lot about the flow. They didn't have a lot of windows. They have all these double height spaces and kind of small mezzanine floor plates. And the fortunate thing is you've got a tenant who wants to maintain all those spaces, maintain all those characteristics. But normally people would want to fill those in and kind of maximize the square footage. There's been prior approvals to the building, as you're well aware. It's changed over time, so the main entries changed quite a bit. The storefronts have changed, and then most of the interior finishes are demoed. I didn't have an opportunity to see the building before the finishes were demoed. There's been interior finishes that were changed too in the 1980s, so they're not quite the same as they used to be. A lot of times when we do these, we evaluate both inside and outside, but the purview is limited to the public right away, so it's a little bit different. And it is a fast-paced project because they have milestones. So it's moving, which in some ways is good because it's get the building occupied sooner the better. Got to use buildings to preserve them. So this, sorry, let me take a sip of water. So this was outlined a bit. The character-defining features of the building were outlined kind of in previous staff reports, but I just wanted to kind of go over them again. Primarily on the outside, the kind of massing of the tower is really important, and kind of how it breaks up. And it's long and linear, and the back roof is a gabled roof, while the front has this kind of step back massing, primarily towards the front end. Sorry, I've got an alarm that goes off every day at 5:45. And then the primary, there's primarily the west facade is really the kind of signature component of the building. It's got a strong vertical axis, both in the massing, but also re-emphasized in the window pattern. So, it's got these strong linear vertical windows with arched tops. It's got the 3-story opening at the base, again, that reinforces this kind of linear characteristic, this vertical up and down characteristic. The corners have these nice subtle chamfers, and kind of the parapets have the same subtle chamfers, so the building kind of eases its edges. And then it's got the Masonic Temple lettering at the top that's important as well. So, we did a standards analysis, the detailed one you have in your packets. I'm going to kind of do the Reader's Digest version, so to speak. So the first standard is really about appropriate use. Is this an appropriate use for this building? And we think it is. I actually think the creative office and kind of the proposal is really well suited because of these funky spaces that they can accommodate that and work it into their plan. The Secretary of the Interior Standards guidelines do allow for new openings, in order to relate to these new uses. And we think that the new openings are consistent with that. And then there's also, the stair tower addition. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my notes on the stair tower addition. The team really did take a careful look at the stairs and kind of how they would relate to the inside and the outside. And they're taking the southeast corner of the building has a stair, kind of a stair up now. They're going to reuse that as a egress stair. And then there's separation distances between the stairs, so it's kind of, you start to have a zone where you need to place the new stairs. And then you've got these funky mezzanines that happen too, so we need to make sure that we hit, egress from all the different mezzanines. So again, we start to limit the space more and more. And we really did want to kind of keep the relationship between the mezzanines and these open spaces. I mean, that's kind of core to this kind of creative office, but also it's, kind of key to the building, these double height spaces and the relationships to the mezzanine. So we didn't really want to place a stair tower inside of these double height spaces. So all these things started to add up to really kind of a logical solution where the stairs would be placed on the outside of the building as opposed to the inside of the building in order to get kind of code compliant egress in the event of a fire. So there were a lot of decisions that kind of drove that, but there was a lot of study to figure out, hey, can we get the stairs on the inside of the building? So we ended up pulling them outside the building, and I'll talk a little about that in a minute or two. So standard number 2 is really about retaining and preserving, the historic character and features of the building. And while new openings are being created, they are all on the sides of the building and to the rear of the building. And I'll talk about kind of their compatibility later, but we don't think it's kind of your impacting primary features of the building. The massing can still read. So standard 3 is really kind of doing things, no fake history. We don't want historicism. We don't want to kind of bring features from another building and add them on to this. That actually did happen in this building in the 1980s, where they brought the kind of windows and doors from a church and put them in. So this project will remove those and bring back the original fenestration patterns at the storefront. And then we also want to preserve and retain any significant changes that have happened in the building, but in this case, we really haven't found any. The building hasn't changed, or changes to the building haven't gained any significance. So we want to also retain distinctive materials, finishes, and craftsmanship. So for the existing windows, we're going to try to keep them as much as we can. On the south elevation, the plan is, if we have to have structural walls built and close some openings, which is part of the project, we'd retain the windows on the south elevation, but on the north and the east elevations, we'd leave a recess so you could tell there was an opening there at one time, but it would just be concrete. But we think that's kind of consistent with the standard 5 and whole big picture of the project. And item 6, you repair before replace, and if you replace to match the original. So we'll be, when needed, or hopefully we won't need to, if needed, we'll replace things kind of to match what's there. Item 7 is to treat the materials in the gentlest means possible, and we're going to work with Caruso as we get into kind of more of the construction documents and permitting phase of this to do some mock-ups and testing to make sure that the methods of paint removal and the methods of lead paint removal are gentle and not affecting the underlying materials. So it's consistent with Standard 7. Standard 8 is to protect archaeological resources. It really isn't applicable to this particular project. So Standard 9 is really about new new additions. So things should be really compatible yet differentiated, and that's kind of the key. That's the key to the stair tower, and we're still kind of working on the details of the stair tower. But we feel like the massing is set back enough on the building that it doesn't compete with the main front facade. That in scale and form, it's consistent with the building, and that it meets the components of Standard number 9. And then we also feel that the new openings, while larger, are again, they're set back from the corners of the building. It's clear that you can understand that they're new fenestration, that they weren't historic on the building. And then we've been careful to kind of orient them vertically. You know, I talked earlier about that vertical orientation. So at least kind of the proportions of everything, again, are consistent throughout the building. So we feel that their openings are compatible yet differentiated. And lastly is that additions should be reversible. Future, you can take them off and get back to the historic building. And again, the stair tower really is kind of a true it's freestanding addition. You can pull it away in the future, and you can get the wall back. You'd have to do a little bit of repair to the openings. Sorry, normally I don't sound this way. But you could get back to the original building if you needed to.
We commend you for your
Keep
long
going.
presentation.
It's adding a level of suspense.
So you do feel like the project as proposed is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. And then we provided a few examples of other projects. So I called up Tim Brandt, who's in the State Historic Preservation Office. He does their architectural review, and said, hey, Tim, we've got this project. What's another project that's standards compliant that has the same features? And he's up in Sacramento, so he pointed this one down the street. So this is the warehouse Artist Loss. It's on I think it's R and 11th or 10th in Sacramento. And it's a federal historic, it's receiving historic federal preservation tax credit, so it's gone through the kind of rigor of SHPO reviewing it for the standards. And you can see, in the image that there's a stair tower addition that's, differentiated, set back, but compatible in massing to the historic warehouse building.
Let me just throw some, I'll defer to John, but when you apply for a federal tax credit, that's, if not the highest rigor and standard that you have to go through, it's one of, so
Yeah.
it's really top level.
And then here's kind of side elevations of the building, and we weren't involved with the project, it's just as an example, but they kind of cleared out brick masonry and hollow clay tile in between the structural systems, and then reframed that with steel framing and placed new windows in the openings. When I talked to Tim, he said that the key to this is there's a number of interpreting the standards about windows, and sorry, I don't have the number of the one, but I can find it if you really want to know it. But one is to keep, to set the new openings back from the corners of the building, again, and then to kind of have them in the plane of the building, have them be relatively simple, and then differentiated from the existing windows. And that's why this project was able to comply, even though it's quite a bit of change. This is a project that we did work on. That's not quite the same as the Masonic Temple, but it's an elevator addition. This is at the Leland Stanford Mansion, again in Sacramento. And you can see there's an elevator tower to the rear, and I'll show you in another slide, but it is still street facing. It's just not the main street. So there's the main elevation on the right of the slide, and to the left there's the elevator addition. Again, it's done in a contemporary fashion. We used what they call a hyphen approach on this. So there's glazing, at least on this elevation, there's glazing, and then there's kind of just a vertical box, which is the elevator. And you can see through the glazing, so you can see the wall plane back behind the glazing. That's one of the things that's even showing up in the transparent renderings at the Masonic Temple, is that you can still feel there's a big wall there. That wall is original to the building. And here's there's a little plan, and the black circle shows where it's located, but you can still see the addition from the street. Again, it gives you an idea about kind of the massing and placement of it, which is consistent with what we're doing on this project. And then this, I showed you Pier 3. This is also a federal historic preservation tax credit project, and there's a number of kind of new windows and spaces integrated into the project. On the left, there used to be a kind of a shed there, and the shed was demolished and infilled with something in the 1970s, and the project took that away and put back kind of a ghost of what was there before, but it has this kind of glass storefront as opposed to, kind of a solid storefront to allow light into the space. And at the lower right-hand corner, there was an opening, but this is between the pier building for 1.5 and the pier building for 3. But they put a new floor level in there and inserted the windows in. And again, the windows still kind of pick up on the multi-pane thoughts of the window, but it's kind of simplified and there. And then there's a whole this project had lots and lots of new windows on it, but these are kind of the most dramatic. And again, it received federal historic preservation tax credit, so it went through a pretty rigorous review. And lastly, I asked Lambert Giesinger at the City of LA if he could think of any, and he pointed out 818 Figueroa Street, which you can see towards the middle of the building, has a very contemporary stair tower that was added for similar reasons for egress. And then on the left, it's just kind of the concept of having painted out windows with structure or elevators or mechanical equipment by that. That's the Eastern Columbia building. You can see kind of the buff-colored windows are all painted out, and there's infill behind them. And again, that got federal historic preservation tax credits. So I think, what we're doing in this project is kind of consistent with the standards and kind of review that we've seen, at least in California. So that concludes my presentation. Fortunately for you guys, you don't have to listen to me anymore. And I'm going to hand it over to Wayne, who's a structural focus.
So we have our structural engineer here to answer any questions you guys might have. So, but we don't have a formal presentation by him. So with that, I guess we're ready to answer questions if you guys have any.
Well, you mentioned the structural. Can you review where the shear walls might be, or is it too preliminary and you don't have those worked out?
I can take a stab on it. Hi, my name is Wayne Chang. I'm a structural focus, the structural engineer for the project. The shear wall primarily is going to be on the perimeter wall, either be the north elevation, south elevation, and the east, and pretty much all the perimeter wall will be considered shear walls. That's what our intent it is. There will not be any interior shear wall being introduced in the building.
I just wondered how they interacted with the windows on the exterior, and if you know the placement of the windows, the placement of the shear walls, and therefore that's why you were closing up certain windows, or are you just proposing a general scheme, but you haven't really worked out where the shear walls were, and we may be able to keep some of those windows if the shear walls don't intrude?
We have a good idea what the shear will need to be, and based on the amount of the shear force demand, based on the historical building code, we will definitely need to close some of the window. And one also very interesting thing about this building is, even though from the north and south elevation seem to be a lot of wall, these walls actually be interrupted by the interior steel column that's embedded into the column, into the shear wall. So basically, it's not a solid piece of wall. It's actually a little skinny little strip of wall due to the embedment of the steel column. And so their effectiveness is weakened already. If you have window opening there, it's already even further weakened the capacity. And so we're definitely going to try and infill some of those existing windows to allow us to gain the capacity to resist the shear walls, the shear capacity.
If you have another.
It's really answering the question exactly. Maybe it hasn't been developed quite yet.
Yeah, but one thing where they are infilling window openings, and you can see in the rendering I've pulled up just from the back side, it does look like shear panels are being, or shear walls are being moved toward the corners in general.
And then the whole, if I may, the whole section is. Let's see, this is how this works. This. construction of.
It's all the way at the end, I'm sorry. I jumped to keep going way.
Well,
to the
this
end.
is a good example.
Okay.
This and how do I control the mouse?
What do you want?
It's actually going to point to the. You see the each end?
I'll point for
Yeah,
you.
exactly. So that's pretty much based on our analysis, that's what we need as a shear wall. And we purposely did that because this gives us a complete shear wall transfer to take the load down to the building. And the same thing with the other side, you can see.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to see.
Yeah.
Is the shear wall placement driving the window infill, or is
Yes.
window infill more a design choice? And I wanted to see the relationship, so that helps me.
Okay.
With the DiPietro project, there was not as much window infill, but there was also some that was pushed toward the sides in general. One thing that hasn't been made clear that I believe is just discussed in the Page and Turnbull letter that came out on Friday. In the areas where windows will be infilled, the original proposal called for the new masonry wall to be set back 2 inches and kind of have a ghost image of the former windows. And I believe the current project is calling for kind of blind windows to be installed, similar to what John showed on the Eastern Columbia building downtown.
That is correct.
Right, so steel sash will be installed in front of the blind opening with opaque glass. So the idea is there'll still be a level of reflectance, and more importantly, there'll be a level of texture and subdivision of those openings, which will then relate to the smaller openings, the small panes that are used as part of these big windows.
Is that showing correctly in the rendering?
No, the rendering predates that decision, unfortunately.
But
Got it.
Yeah.
I believe the elevations have that ghosted in. It may be very difficult to see because of the strength with which it's drawn. But this is if I may, Jay, this is the south facade only that we were proposing, adding the mullions with the back painted reflective glass detail.
And why the south facade only?
Well, it really comes down to a cost issue and a feasibility issue. So that's how we approached it.
On the north elevation, really.
John, you have to come up to the speaker in your condition.
On the north elevation, they're actually not filling in quite anywhere near as many windows, which is part of the reason why we weren't proposing to do it on the north elevation. And then certain key windows we're trying to keep, so we kept windows that related to the fire escape on the east side and that sort of thing. So at least it makes sense.
And just the orange windows are existing windows to be retained on the north facade. The blue window here is a new window opening that was part of the former DiPietro approval, and then the rectangles are the windows that are proposed to be infilled. And it's true that most of these are down at lower levels where they won't be as visible from the street. If we look at the north or the south facade, where we have so many more windows, I guess we should look at this one. At this point, only these 3 windows were initially proposed along with these kind of vents up at the top. What will happen now is everywhere where you see a white rectangle will actually have grid lines and glass set in front of the blind panel. That will kind of give that texture and appearance of the original windows, and I think make the new large windows kind of better integrate with the facade.
Jay, could you go back to the building that actually had that treatment?
Sure. Eastern Columbia.
It's probably in my
Where was it?
package, actually.
It is. There are no
Sorry.
numbers, though.
Keep going.
Oh, the one here downtown. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. It's this one here on the left. And you can see, it's actually a similar situation to the central storage building where we made them take the paint off.
Right. And
This will actually look closer to the new central storage because the glass won't be transparent. It'll have some opaque coating on it, but it'll still reflect light. We'll choose a color. Often gray tones kind of look best to look like a natural window in that situation. So it'll definitely look more like a window than this or the central storage building did.
Okay. Are you done with your presentations then?
Yes.
Do you have any questions, Commissioner
No, not at this
Morgan?
moment.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Maybe a couple more. What do you intend to do when you remove the paint with the kind of ghosted mural on the north-facing?
So we've taken a very hard look at that, and so I'll go right to the answer, and I can go to the reason why. It will be removed, and the building will be painted the solid color of the base building that's there today. But we have studied it, that the lead paint that is up there, I guess, is, I don't know, super lead, I guess, but it's really bad. It needs to be removed. The ghost graphic or the faded graphic that's up there right now is peeling already. It's not suitable for encasement in any sort of clear coat. So the only option would be to try to recreate it. We've never seen that done well. We would much prefer just to have the building painted a solid color to match what's there today than try and recreate something and not have it come off very well.
Perhaps some very good photo documentation of the existing situation would be useful.
Perhaps.
We can provide that.
Another question, are you trying to achieve any kind of LEED rating as far as your improvements to the building environmentally?
I think that
Please come up.
This is Evan Krenzian.
Hi, thank you. I think that the tenant will endeavor to do LEED certification for their interior build-out. I think it's common practice for CBRE to meet a certain LEED certification level. I'm not sure if they will register with LEED or just build to a certain kind of LEED silver or gold equivalent, but I know that they do that with their interior build-outs.
Thank you.
Anything else? Oh, you have one? Go
One
ahead.
quick question. On the stairs, the two different ones, the one that Caruso, his report, and then the one from the structural engineer, it says the stairs serve a purpose of structural, but it's also code compliant. Is it something that has to be on the outside? I mean, it's not something that could be inside the stairs itself.
That's correct.
So, because the code compliant, it has to.
Well, the stairs are necessary for code compliance in the location of that quadrant or that corner of the building to connect all mezzanines and all the exiting. So it's a code compliant exiting. The trouble with the layout and the structure is that we can't marry the layout of the interior so that it works for
Inside.
the building inside and still works with the existing structure of the building.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing now. We have one card from Sean Bursell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Commission. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Sean Bursell with the Glendale Historical Society. And the Glendale Historical Society is grateful to Caruso Affiliated for reaching out to us to discuss this project and for hiring a historic preservation consultant to guide them on it. We at TGHS are strong advocates of adaptive reuse, and we are eager to see this important landmark occupied and vital again. To be clear, leaving the building as it is today benefits no one but the pigeons, and we don't want to see that. We do understand that the Masonic Temple is a particularly difficult building to adapt to modern purposes, and that more changes than those already approved may be necessary to make it commercially viable. In addition, we are also cognizant of the desire of the applicant to move swiftly with this project, and it is not our goal to delay the project or to erect any unnecessary barriers. We do, however, have concerns about the review process and the extent of the alterations proposed, and we would like to offer constructive suggestions to address them. First, as I said, we have a concern about the process by which this project is moving forward. As Mr. Platt noted, it is irregular for a renovation of this magnitude of an important designated historic landmark to be considered in a piecemeal fashion. Presenting the project in phases at separate hearings makes it impossible for us and for the public to grasp the totality of the proposed work, the relations between the various proposed changes, and the cumulative impact until the very end of the process. Many components depend upon changes to be considered in other phases. This includes proposed materials and design details, and also the reasons for additions. For example, the need for the exterior staircase that was just discussed appears to be driven by the size and the placement of the elevators in the building, as the elevators will require the removal of the existing west stairwell. That, in turn, requires significant changes to the historic lobby. So what happens in the interior impacts the exterior, and ideally, the lobby and the exterior should be considered in detail and all at one time. We also note that the addition of the exterior staircase should only be approved if it is necessary to the building's new use. And Mr. Morgan made an inquiry about that. I'm not sure you got the full answer on that, whether it was in fact necessary, because the letter from the structural engineer does not explicitly state, and I didn't hear it stated explicitly, that the staircase must be placed on the exterior of the building, but only that it can't be located where it was previously proposed. And so we would like more information to know if this condition of necessity has been met. We also have concerns about the amount of proposed fenestration and infill of original windows along the south, north, and rear facades. We must respectfully disagree with staff and the historic preservation consultant that the facade's extravagant plainness and irregular fenestration, which are a hallmark of this building's exterior when you drive down the street, are not part of the historic character. Indeed, as the staff report notes, quote, the haphazard window patterns at the side facades apparently were driven largely by the interior uses associated with the building's early years, i.e. the masons. There's a National Park Service document called New Openings in Secondary Elevations or Introducing New Windows in Blank Walls. That clarifies that meagerly fenestrated secondary elevations, quote, can contribute to the historic character of buildings. The, quote, integration of new openings requires careful consideration, end quote, especially when they are highly visible, as is the case here. New openings, furthermore, should not, quote, make such a strong architectural statement as to radically change the appearance of the building or overwhelm the composition of the historic facade. Therefore, we would like the Commission to consider the following suggestions to minimize the impact of these changes on the side and rear elevations and to maintain more of the texture, the character, and the relationships of solids to voids of the original building design while meeting the project goals. First, we agree with the staff report that windows eligible for retention should be identified in the window condition survey. Any steel windows that have deteriorated beyond repair should be replaced with new steel sash to match the original. Number two, on the side facades, we accept that larger window openings are desired, indeed needed for commercial purposes, particularly on the upper showcase level. However, we would like to see the size of the proposed new windows gradually reduced, tapered down as they descend, as is now proposed for the rear. And as I believe was when DiPietro did it, that was the idea for the north side. One of the most distinctive features of the side facades is indeed their radical asymmetry. So our suggestion would alleviate the intense symmetry that's being proposed here for the fenestration, and because otherwise that symmetry is going to become those side facades' dominant and non-historic feature. And I would say this has become particularly important as we learn that structural issues as I thought I heard about the shear walls, the windows are going to require additional shoring up of the building. So it sounds like, and I'm not sure because I wasn't quite clear on what was being said, that these large window additions are going to require more infill of the original windows than had been originally proposed back last month. And so the new windows, in our belief, should be reduced in size before so many originals are lost. Where possible, rather than infilling, we'd like to see an exploration, and I believe this is being done, as I heard here, of the potential to retain existing windows and infill behind them. However, if I understood it correctly, the current concept is not to retain those existing windows and infill behind them, but put something like Windows Light in front of them, something that looks like a window but that mimics the window but is not the original window. Seems to us, why don't you keep the original windows and then infill behind it, and then the look is maintained. Number 4, at the rear, we understand that the nano-wall folding glass doors with European-style balcony are a signature feature of the top floor. We request, however, that they be limited to level 7, where they will be far less visible from the ground level. We would also like to see the folding glass doors and walls placed so as to allow the glass barrier to be flush with the exterior or slightly recessed to minimize the visual impact and to preserve the strikingly flat texture of the secondary elevations. I believe that's the case, but just to make that point. In addition, other windows should look like those proposed for the south and north facades. Number 5, our preference for all new windows is that they be manufactured in a compatible, contemporary, and differentiated steel rather than aluminum. Number 6, and our final one, whenever I talk to anybody about this building, they talk about the ghost signs, and people love those. Those painted signs on the north and south elevations were not original to the building. Based on the photographic evidence that we have looked at, they first appeared on the building sometime between 1938 and 1955. We're not sure exactly when, but they've become part of the building's fabric. So we urge that the existing ghost signs be maintained to the extent possible. And when you considered this building in 2010, in the staff report on page 6, there was a photo of the south elevation of the building that shows a Welcome to Glendale sign on the south elevation above that little row of windows right below the top, and it said Welcome to Glendale. We would love to see that restored to the building. It was such a great feature. So again, the Glendale Historical Society appreciates Caruso Affiliated's willingness to invest in this historic building, and we look forward to its rehabilitation in a way that honors its eccentricities while making it an inviting and functional space for new tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. I think before I close the public hearing, I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions. If we could maybe get a response to the question about the condition of necessity for the stairwell, if we could get a little more clarification on that, and then the infill behind the original windows as opposed to putting the blind windows in front. Is that common? Is it possible?
I think right now what we'd like to do is ask for 5 minutes so that our team can get together and make sure that we have one cohesive response to the points that have been raised by the Historic Society.
Certainly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which gives me time to vamp for a second if you want.
Okay, so we take a recess?
Well, no, I have something I can fill in a few minutes of that.
Of course you
5.
Okay, perfect.
Only because Mr. Loomis reminded me that I hadn't, it's in the staff report, but I didn't vocalize what our staff recommendation is. And our staff recommendation for this Phase 1 work is approval with conditions. And if the commission would like me to run through the conditions pretty quickly, they might help you in your deliberation as we go forward.
Please. Thank you.
Condition 1 would be to basically provide all relevant drawings for the exterior stairway so that we actually know. And this is an obvious condition, and it's obvious that the team would be producing that for your next meeting, but we want to make sure it's in the record. Those would be elevation, section, and detail drawings, as well as material boards, material samples, whatever else would be required depending on the direction the structure goes. Condition 2 is that a condition survey be performed for the steel windows that are in place that potentially could be replaced or reused. Having seen some of the windows, some of them look like that might be a hard sell. The good news is that steel sash that completely matches, as we've talked about before, completely matches the profiles and details of these windows is still made and is still available. So replacement windows could exactly or very, very closely match what's there. But we would have a survey done to identify the more original fabric we can retain, of course, is the optimal solution. So we want that for our review. Condition 3 would be to provide elevation and section drawings for the new sash for the large replacement windows, or I'm sorry, the new large windows. That would include. Condition 3 is for the replacement steel sash, just so that we have a comparison between the drawing of the sections of the proposed replacements and then comparative drawings of the existing historic steel sash. Condition 4 would be to provide detailed drawings for the new aluminum windows. Staff is very comfortable with these being aluminum windows as a means of, a very, very subtle means of differentiation. Plus, windows of this scale, I don't know how steel windows would even be made to do that. So we're comfortable with aluminum for that. Condition 5 would be to provide a recess, and this was written before we knew about the solution that I mentioned. So we definitely want to have a recess at all window openings that are being closed. So there's kind of a ghost of the former opening. And now that the team has developed the concept of inserting kind of a false window in front of the blind panel, that kind of covers, I put in explore alternatives to better recall the historic appearance of the openings, anticipating that might be the solution, and I'm glad that it was. I think that's more appropriate for the building. We would also need, those won't be just a window, and John Lisek could probably address this better than I can, but there are maintenance and waterproofing and just ongoing life of these window issues, so I don't think it's as simple as taking an old steel sash and just screwing it in front of the blind window panel. There'll have to be venting systems in place, weeps and other things. So this condition would, or the window drawing conditions would include details for those window openings. Condition 6 is to provide a section drawing depicting typical window infill for the openings, and that would include the blind window infill. And condition 7 was to provide section and detail drawings of the glass railings proposed at the east facade. Looking at the drawings, I was kind of assuming that they were going to be flat. It's one of the problems with this timeline. I think if the commission is open to these nanowall openings, there would be a glass railing in front of it because they would go down to the floor level, open up kind of like a patio or balcony window. And so for safety, they need to put a railing. I think that railing should either be mounted flush to the building, or if there's enough of a recess, it could be mounted inside the actual opening. And I think that would be a suitable solution, so we just want to make sure that's considered. And that was everything I had for the work so far.
Great. Thank you.
So talk a little bit more about with the expedited time frame that they're under. What will come to the commission is just phases 1, 2, and 3.
Or others. As they propose it today, it's 3 phases. Okay. Two are the significant phases that will get the project moving so the construction can begin in time to meet their deadlines. Phase 1 is focusing on the structural, so the window cutting, being able to cut the window openings. We wouldn't approve new windows until we saw the detailed drawings, but if you vote tonight to approve that, they would be allowed to get a permit to cut the new openings, basically.
Can I just finish my sentence?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. what I'm curious about is what happens in between our meetings. Are you having bi-weekly meetings with them to review progress, to see drawings, to make sure, to inspect what they're doing at the site, to make sure that we don't go too far? My concern is, we had made some approvals prior with DiPietra, and I was extremely disappointed to go into the lobby and see it completely demolished.
Actually, no, you approved the demolition of the lobby because those were hollow clay tile walls, which couldn't be seismically upgraded. So the DiPietra proposal,
not the mural.
Murals.
the mural didn't exist, and that's something they worked out with staff. They did a probe into the arched opening over the door. They looked in through the hole in the plaster, and there was no mural there. And they showed us photos of it. And
So the photos they showed us of wasn't a current time.
right, that was a historic photo that there had been a mural. It was covered over by the time they started the project, probably before they owned the building, I would guess. And since we had that historic photo, we thought, well, if that mural's still there, we want to keep it. So they did a probe, proved to us
Okay.
that it wasn't still there, and then that part of the wall was demolished along with the rest of the lobby.
Okay,
But
so-
we did know that most of the lobby walls are going to be demolished and then rebuilt to match the
Yeah, I was
historic.
mainly concerned about the mural.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe it would be helpful for us as a commission to get those staff reports, like updates, in kind of our update section from you when there's things changing, because then we go in for a tour expecting one thing or thinking another
Right,
and asking
exactly.
questions, and it's been approved by you, or again, they notified you, right? So there was nothing.
Yeah, in this situation, knowing that you were going in, I should have thought of that. In general, though, staff, once there's an approval from either HPC or DRB with conditions or anything like that, staff is given the authority to kind of make the decision whether this meets the intent of the Board or Commission's request. And anything that varies significantly we'll bring back, and that's what we hold over the project teams on any project. If they start deviating so far that we're not comfortable that the intent of the approval is being met, work has to stop, and we schedule a hearing. So,
Okay, so back to this project now,
Right.
current day. So what is the plan for staff to stay in touch with them in between our meetings or between these phase 1, 2, and 3 reviews? to
yeah,
make
we
sure
don't have set meetings at this point on large projects. We often participate in set meetings for the Brand Library, for the Central Library. Staff participates in kind of project team meetings. That schedule hasn't been set up in this case at this time. For something with these, for example, these conditions, if they came in and provided a window survey and said we can save 7 windows and we have to replace 10 windows, whatever it would be, if we felt that that survey was properly done and had enough evidence in it to back up their determination, that's where staff has the authority based on your approval with the condition to kind of let that part of the project move forward, which would let them, for example, order. Actually, that wouldn't work if we did the survey and then we reviewed shop drawings of the new windows and thought that they met all of our requirements. They could go ahead and, for example, and order those windows without having to come back to the commission to show you the drawings to make sure that you're comfortable with them.
Well, can that be one of the conditions that the staff is invited to their weekly, bi-weekly construction meetings? My fear is with a project moving so quickly, you know what happens. Okay, they're developers first, trying to work in a historic building, preservation sensitive, but let's be honest, right? Things happen, especially with the speed of construction needing to meet a December date for a tenant.
Yeah,
That I want to make sure you have all awareness.
Yeah, we're comfortable with that as
Okay.
much as we can. We would participate in those meetings. I think if you ask the project, reopen the hearing and ask the project team if they would invite us to do that.
Okay.
You might not need to make it a condition. We could just make it an arrangement. But
And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sure. Perhaps we can, Jay, we can also ask the project team to clarify what will happen in the next month before the coming hearing, whether in fact they will be doing any work on the building or merely preparing their final engineering drawings.
right. Yeah, and when
This hearing sets in motion a set of assumptions about how they're going to engineer the building that they then need to get into plan check and get approvals before 1 month is
Yeah, work
very tight
won't-
timeframe for
yeah,
them
work-
to do that. They may not actually be doing any work in the building. after next hearing.
And you could also verify what their estimated timeframe is. I had understood that the second hearing would likely be at the May hearing, which seems very soon, but you can ask the team what their expectations are.
Okay. Yes.
How about some of the recommendations that Mr. Burcell set? Are they in consideration at all?
Well, I think some of them are addressed. Some of them we don't agree with necessarily professionally. If you want to ask specific questions, I didn't.
Yeah, I couldn't write
each
it
of
as
those.
fast as.
I have their.
The letter.
Yeah. The letter is in our package. Do you need a copy?
Yeah, well, no, I've got the letter.
Is it the April 10th letter?
April 16th letter?
April 16th.
Yeah, the April 16th letter,
Have it?
the windows, yeah.
Oh. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry. So do you have a specific question on those?
Well, I like their idea of the gradual difference in windows rather than being, everything is symmetrical now.
Yeah,
The building was famous for not being. So the kind of thing is, are the windows being driven by the client, or are the windows being driven by?
To some degree, the windows are being driven by the client and the owner's wishes to best rehabilitate the building, and we respect that to some degree. When we brought the project to you with the DiPietros, in both cases, we noted, even though the windows at the lower levels were smaller, we noted that by producing vertical symmetry, it created an area that was clearly differentiated from the horizontal asymmetry of the existing facades. So we thought, and I think John Lisak mentioned that this kind of central section of windows is going to be a clear intervention to anyone with some
Knowledge.
looking at it. The issue I think we would have if we kind of gradually reduce the size of the windows from the upper to the middle to the lower level at the south facade or the north facade is that we're introducing kind of a new diagonal kind of line into the building where those vertical diagonals don't exist. This is very much a building about straight up and down lines at the front. So I don't know that we want to introduce a new pattern at the side that kind of creates diagonal lines where it's enough, I think, to create this kind of this vertical base structure. It's also a similar verticality to what the DiPietro approvals had, but obviously they had smaller windows. Right. So we don't agree, and you can ask the project team if that's something they would consider, but I actually think it's a step in the wrong direction to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you look at the original windows, although they're kind of random sprinkling in the exterior, they are of uniform size, although a few different sizes, but they're similar. You know what I mean? When they repeat, they're identical. So I think we need to be careful about introducing multiple sizes. Yeah, and I don't like the V-ing effect that would create. It's going to not be the right thing for the building that's got a very vertical and strong presence and massing. And I think, while larger, I think it's always a challenge to balance current day building use.
Exactly.
Obviously, we've seen this building unused for a lot of reasons for many, many years. So it's going to be balancing, trying to achieve a building that can be leased and used, being very sensitive to historic preservation. So I think, to me, personally, the windows being vertical is the right choice, and it distinguishes it enough from the old that I'm
So I haven't technically closed the public hearing, so do you want to go into this?
No.
Okay.
No, we could. They have a right to rebut based on
Right.
that.
No, I'm actually going to call whoever wants to come back up. But just for the record, I just wanted to note that I was not on the commission in 2010 for the original presentation, though I was in 2013 when the DiPietros requested some of the changes to the fenestration. And so my colleagues have some recollections that I don't. Okay, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm going to turn over the structural issues to Wayne, and he can address some of those comments, and we will have John respond to a couple of the issues.
Thank you.
David. Excuse me. Seems like losing my voice too. I'm sure it's not from John. Don't worry. It's definitely not from John. So real quick.
What's your last name?
Chang's.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the record.
For the record. Wayne Chang. Real quick, I think one question has come up regarding the stairway. The reason, if there is any consideration putting the stairway inside the building. And I would like to say that our design team, as a part of it, have extensively looked into that option already. We look into that in different discipline has to have input on that. And the only two feasible locations for the interior stairway, in fact, is actually shown in the diagram. Let's get a control.
Yeah. Here you go. I've also, hold on one second, I changed presentations. Let's go back to yours. Okay, this is at the beginning. Just the arrow keys on the right side.
Okay. Sorry. I think that's one thing that we didn't talk about toward the end of the presentation is this. Based on our study, there are only two viable locations for the stairway with the northwest corner and then southwest corner. Those are only two based on the area separation and other code compliance requirements. Both locations have a similar problem structurally. Both of them are going to be cutting the floor slab. That's going to be required. Excuse me. That has the same issue with cutting the gravity beams, as well as cutting the diaphragm for the lateral resistance. Both of them pretty much pose the same problem structurally. That's the reason we do not recommend and recommend to go in the exterior. Well, thank you very much. Okay. So I hope that can clarify. If not, let me know. The question regarding the location of an elevator. The elevator location is pretty much the only place that we can find in the building to support it. And the reason has to do with the column location as well as the interference with existing foundation. There's a lot of foundation down below, so there's not much room to put the elevator in the elevator pit. So that's the reason why the location of an elevator is pretty much set as what it is there. Okay? I guess we can talk about windows. Let's talk about windows a little more. I guess I apologize for being a little bit unclear in the beginning, so I rushed it. Let me go to... Start with this is one. Let's start with our north elevation real quick. And allow me to back up a little bit. The building has been constructed back there a long time ago. The concrete construction back then was definitely not meeting what current code requirement is. It definitely does not have the knowledge that we have nowadays. These shear wall, even though they're concrete wall, they're not really a shear wall. They're just concrete wall. And they have opening on there. They're not designed as what current day will call perforated shear wall, where we have special detail around the opening that allow you to have opening inside a concrete wall. These opening will punch because they want a window there, and that's the only thing they recognize. And so in our study, we found out that the wall wasn't insufficient enough to resist the seismic demand prescribed by the historical building code. And therefore, we went in, tried to figure out what's the best way to fix this building in terms of adding shear wall. And what we have, and just like, let's sidetrack here real quick. What we're trying to do is really introduce a shear wall here, continuous shear wall element here and here. That's continuous. And that's require us infilling these windows here. Okay? So with that saying, with or without the opening window in the middle, we will still need to infill the existing window opening there to allow us to introduce the shear wall element that we need to make this building safe during an earthquake.
Yeah.
Okay? I guess I'm going to go down. And a similar thing on the south elevation. Identical issue. We were trying to introduce a shear wall panel. As you can see, here's the panel of shear wall here, shear wall, and the shear wall. That's what we're trying to introduce. Okay? And thus...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. We don't have a pointer.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can try to use this. We should get a pointer. We should get a clicker also.
I'm sorry.
Just so we can keep you at the podium and on the microphone.
Okay. So what we're trying to do, really, again, as I'm saying, these surface.
Too far away.
No, it should
Jay,
work,
you need
but
to point.
I'll help.
You point.
There we go. You're right, a little bit too far away.
We need a bigger podium.
So what we're saying is we're introducing a shear wall here, shear wall element here, and full height shear wall here. And that's require us, again, infilling these little windows here. So it's driven structurally to infill those windows. Okay? I guess we'll talk about a little bit on the in a similar fashion, similar explanation in the east too. Again, it's a shear wall. We're introducing a shear wall element here, and of course now it requires to infill all these guys, these windows. Any questions?
No, that answers the question I asked a while ago. I appreciate that.
So, no problem. Sorry for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll leave it up there for now.
Backfill windows. Okay. Thanks. Now, right now, what we have proposed is really to create a 2-inch reveal without window. Now, we don't have a certain amount of meat to grab on the these walls, and we need these concrete. We are using the existing concrete shear wall. No, not shear wall. The existing concrete wall to help us resist seismic forces. We're taking advantage of that. That's the benefit of a historical building code. Allow us to take advantage of existing building. Now, by putting more recess in this opening, again, now we're creating a situation to weaken the shear wall. We're in that wall. So we're basically really limited with that 2-inch reveal now. Not going to be able to eat more room into that recess to get our effective shear wall. We did talk about that before as one option to really recess it in, but that's really structurally, it doesn't work for us.
Okay.
So talk a little bit more, though, about your window solution, where they're going to just be, opaque, but the window will still exist, versus true infill, where there will only be a recess and basically filled in with concrete.
Concrete, right. Concrete.
Which is which, and where are they on the facade?
I guess.
Okay, so it's really only on the south facade where we're proposing adding the windows back in. And again, it's somewhat compromised no matter what we do, because the recess of the new concrete can only be 2 inches from the existing face of the building. So even then, we have a very shallow shadow line within which we can insert the back painted glass windows. And then on the east elevation and north elevation, we're not proposing that. Again, there's very limited openings left that get infilled, because there's almost no openings on the north side as it sits today. So there's really not the same scope of a gesture that we could make.
I just want to understand, is it a design perspective driving that? Why would there be a different solution on one facade than all the other 3 facades? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Is someone from Gensler here today?
No, we don't have anyone from Gensler, but we can talk through the design solution. So if you look at the existing facade, which is here, and then we go to our proposal, we have as many openings as we can keep vision glass in place, we will keep in place. That leaves just these openings at the lower level, which are large. They're just not that visible from anywhere on the street because you have buildings in front of you. So it's only these lower openings and 1 or 2 random locations that we're infilling. Other than that, on the north side. And then it's a relatively similar situation on the south side.
Well, okay, so on the north side, you're infilling, and there will literally just be a recess of 2 inches, but it'll be a solid concrete in the old window opening.
Correct.
On the south side, explain that detail, and then I'd like to know why is there a different choice for the one facade versus the others.
Come come forward.
Yeah, I'd like Peter's been in the middle of this. Let me get him involved.
I'm Peter Hayden. I'm Senior Vice President of Engineering for Caruso. The reason there's a divergence between the north and the south fenestration is in direct response to requests from John Lezak, our historical architect, working together with Jay Platt. They asked for the special fenestration differences.
Right. Well,
and we were happy to accommodate.
Yeah.
If you guys don't want it,
we didn't ask for a differential between the three facades.
no, but you specifically requested on the south.
Yeah,
Their
it was a
proposal.
presumption that they would go everywhere. So if the team is making an argument that they don't think it's visible, and I believe this is something that probably isn't a critical path item right now that could be brought back to the commission at the next round of hearings, they might be able to produce some visuals, some photographs to show whether or not these are visible or largely visible, and then you could base a decision on that. But staff presumed that each blind opening would have some sash in front of it.
Okay.
On all 4 facades.
All 3 that are having this, yeah.
That's true, 3.
Yeah.
But at this time, it's only the south.
As presented
Right.
tonight, yeah.
Okay.
This is something the condition, staff recommends conditions, as you know, and commission can add conditions, so.
All right, with that, we'll bring John Lezak back to address some of the issues.
The south was a compromise that we were making in order to address some concerns about trying to keep windows, and the intent right now is to reuse the original steel sash in those openings. But we haven't done enough of a detailed analysis yet to determine, the placement of the sash in the wall plane versus the need for structural reinforcement. But we're going to do a complete window survey as the project moves forward, and we'll get the details for that worked out. But that's kind of the intent right now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the new window openings, because I think they're consistent with standards, and I found interpreting the standards number 21 is also about windows. It says adding new windows on secondary elevations. And it reads, some other buildings, especially commercial and warehouse structures, may have one or more blank or unfenestrated exterior walls that are not significant and can be successfully altered without negatively impacting the historic building's character. The number of new openings should be limited so that enough mass remains to understand the wall's sense of solidity. And it is usually recommended when adding compatible new windows that the windows not be cut in the first bay from each side. So we're conforming with that standard. Either on the wall, but instead be pulled back at least one bay, and we're pulling back several bays. This approach helps to differentiate the new windows from features that are part of the original construction of the building and identifies them as contemporary openings to satisfy the requirements of new use. So that the new windows do not appear historic, they should be very plain, preferably just kind of simple cutouts in the wall without trim or period architectural surrounds. And the windows themselves should be generally distinguished from the historic windows by use of a simple or slightly different window light configuration. That's quoting from that. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. I think that another thing is to differentiate them using the aluminum versus steel. We've used aluminum windows to replace actual historic steel windows on approved projects, and included a preservation tech note that talks about that. We're pretty comfortable that we can get steel windows type details and aluminum framing from certain manufacturers, not all manufacturers, but certain manufacturers. So I don't think we want, even the standards don't necessarily say, hey, you have to use the same material. You can use different materials. One of the things, too, about the size of the windows is they really, natural light is good. I think it's a sustainable thing. And, we were looking at this, there's kind of a rule of thumb that light penetrates into building space about 1.5 times the size of the opening. It's kind of an old rule of thumb, and if you start to apply that here, even with that, the light's not really getting into the center of the floor plate, even with these extended window openings. So I think, the more natural light and the more kind of ability to open the outside, I actually think improves the chances of the building being sustainable over a longer period of time. And the windows are kind of, simple and plain and flush in the building, so I do think we're, complying with the standards that, Jay had mentioned in one of the original things, the building was built with kind of party walls to the side. That probably was the intent that Glendale would have grown, and it would have been, there would have been buildings built to the right adjacent to that. At some points, it had a streetscape. It just never panned out, and that gets me a little bit to my last point, which is kind of thinking about the period of significance to the building versus the signage. And when we were evaluating this building, we think it's really significant for its architecture. We think of it as being significant, in the development of Glendale and kind of having the Masons build something monumental here. But the Masons were only in the building a very short amount of time. And the period of significance, we think, is really short on the building. So we don't necessarily think that the signs become a contributing element to the historic significance of this structure. So we think there's latitude in how they get treated in the future because they don't link necessarily to the building itself. So that's my abbreviation. Did I miss anything?
I have one
Thank
comment
you.
to add on building signs, and it's related to the lead paint issue on the entire building. I've got 35 years of experience in the environmental consulting business. I've worked on almost every type of project for pollution engineering. I've never seen a lead content higher than what we have on this building. It's 35,000 parts per million of lead. It's federally listed waste. It has to be dealt with in great care. We're going to need to scaffold the whole building. We're going to have to shrink wrap the scaffolding. Everybody that goes in there is going to have to be under respiratory protection. Everybody's going to have to be monitored. Everything that comes off that building has to be contained and disposed of under manifest. And retention of these signs will be almost impossible. I honestly don't know how we'd do it.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, one more? Yes.
Madam Chair, I was going to suggest or ask if somebody from the Crusoe team could talk about this schedule, that what will happen and unfold between now and back to the commission.
Evan, are you prepared to deal with that? Before we go to Evan, in addition to just not thinking it's the right thing to do to have a variety of new window sizes introduced on the north and south elevations, the commercial viability of the project in the contingencies that CBRE has on us in order to occupy the building. Currently, their LOI has them occupying the top 4 floors, excluding the 9th floor, which, as we said before, would not be occupied. But they also have an option on the lower floors of the building. It's very important to them that they not create any floor in which any of their employees feel like a stepchild because it has smaller windows or a different fenestration pattern. So not only does that go to the size of the windows as they come down the building, it's also part of the issue with the nanowall. And were we able to have a more expansive amount of glass on the west elevation, we would have done it. But again, because of structural considerations, we were forced to make those slightly smaller. And then along those same lines, because CBRE is a very collaborative company, and they're going to be communicating between multiple floors in this building, having 2 elevators is just a non-starter for them. And then the size of the elevator is really driven by the elevator code and the requirement for a gurney in at least one of the elevators. So there's been no arbitrary decisions in this. We've studied everything. I can tell you we've redrawn these windows probably 100 times over the course of a month. So even though it seems like a very accelerated schedule, we've accelerated it by working around the clock and weekends at times, and not by ignoring some facts about the building or not exploring some design option. So, we appreciate all your attention and the comments of the Historic Society, and hopefully we can gain approval today and go on. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In terms of the schedule between now and
tell us who you are.
Oh, I'm Evan Krenzine, Vice President of Development for Caruso Affiliated. So I heard some discussion when we were leaving the room about the schedule.
Yeah, let me elaborate. Commissioner Shire is concerned that following today, work will begin tomorrow or a week later on the building. That may impact issues the commission might look at in a month when you come back for the phase 2 approval. If you could speak to what work the Caruso team will actually be engaged in over the coming.
And following up on that, Commissioner Shire also asked whether you would be able to involve staff in your ongoing kind of meetings as needed or on a regular basis so that we can kind of stay in touch with all of this.
Well, I'll let Peter fill in some of the holes, but I think part of the intent of the schedule we developed with staff was to provide the commission and staff to be able to weigh in on some of the final details that we haven't yet developed in terms of the exterior staircase design and the specifics of the storefront that are to match the original historic storefront, but to involve everyone so it is a collaborative process rather than bringing a stair design to you today saying this is, approve this now, we'll work together to, we know the location and the size and the massing that needs to be approved today, but in terms of the specific details, we see that as a collaborative process, and I think something that's valuable to you all in the city. In terms of schedule, I think Peter can talk to what exactly we'll be doing in the next month.
Excuse me. To meet schedule, we are already into plan check. In fact, I was into building and safety 2 days ago with a full set for floor openings, wall openings, openings onto the fire escape, so that we can get started with demolition of mezzanine areas, floor plates in mezzanine so that we can get the elevator going, penetrations to the exterior so we can get ready for the window placement, penetration to the exterior so we can get the stair tower placement. So what we're coming to you really asking you, hearts open today, is for the penetration approval so that tomorrow I can go in and pull permit on the demolition aspect of the job. That gives us the ability to get the job started. And yes, next week we have contractors ready to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how does the lead paint abatement work with your demoing as of tomorrow?
It's being coordinated as we speak, and I'm not the construction manager. Mark Wicks is our vice president in charge of construction for the project. He's working a schedule right now, and that will be very closely coordinated. We don't have any lead paint interior to the building, so his first job would be demolition of floor slab and elevator plate so we can get that ready. Building the elevator shaft is months worth of work.
And then do you start cutting openings for the stairwell now too? How does that work?
That needs to be fast-tracked as much as possible because the stairwell openings, we will probably need to have a lift to deliver supplies and workers to the floors. Vertical transportation in this building is a challenge. It's 8 floors with substandard stairs.
Yes.
So what Mark's probably going to have to do is get lead abatement started in the area where we need to place the lift, and then get that cleared so that we can go ahead and cut the openings and get the lift in.
Mm-hmm. That's the lift. When you say lift, you mean the elevator.
It's a temporary elevator that serves only
Okay.
construction. Yeah, it serves only construction. It'll be there until we're ready to place the stairs.
Okay, but will the openings, I guess, since we'll be reviewing presumably the designs, the proposal for the stairwell at the next meeting, do you begin now to do, punching out where, I mean, I'm not a construction I don't have construction terminology, to be honest with you, but are you going to start punching out on the floors where the stairwell is going to be? And then we design the, design
That's what
it
we're
later?
asking you for, yes.
Okay.
We're asking you for the massing and the approval of having an exterior tower, and then we're going to work with staff and our consultant and come up with a design that's acceptable.
So your preparations at this point for that stairwell to go in will not impact what the design solution might be?
No.
If you approve the presence of the stairwell this evening, there's the presumption that there will be a doorway, kind of a standard-sized doorway cut into the wall at each level, each landing of the stairway, which will be hidden behind the box that forms the stair enclosure.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I wasn't articulating well. I guess that's kind of, okay.
If I may as well, one of the considerations, and I think probably John or Jay can dive into it deeper if necessary, but in working with the Crusoe team, one of the considerations for the exterior stair tower was to push it back as far as possible. Not on mic, but...
Thought we were all on.
I know, I thought so too.
You, Alan. Chris, could you do that?
Disconnected.
There you go.
One of the considerations for that exterior stair tower was to push the west facade of it as far back from Brand Boulevard as possible, given that the Brand Boulevard facade is arguably the most significant and well thought out architectural facade and has this incredible degree of symmetry that no other portion of the building really has. So we didn't want to sort of compete with that symmetry. You take that premise of trying to push that stair tower back as far as possible. There is a limitation about how far it can go back with and maintain the appropriate runs of the stairs and the openings that would sort of engage at appropriate locations in the building relative to where those elevators are going. And correct me if I'm wrong,
That's correct.
pretty much that's where the elevator is landed. And I think it's some 10 feet back from the sidewalk face, I believe.
Should be 14.
Yeah.
14.
Yeah. Greater than I remember. So we think that's an acceptable and appropriate distance.
We saw an earlier proposal where the elevator tower was pushed forward to the street, and we said that was not acceptable. The consultant felt the same way, and I think the team worked really hard to find, how far could they get it pushed back. So.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions of the team before we close the public hearing? Okay, so with that, we'll close the public hearing and begin our deliberations.
I was going to say most of my concerns have been addressed, so I'm pleased with what's going so far.
I just have a couple words. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to the Crusoe team and all of the consultants involved. We really appreciate the thorough presentation and the drawings and the quick turnaround of revised drawings for our meeting today. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank Crusoe and team for, although being a developer first, being sensitive to historic preservation. Those are typically in conflict, and so it's nice to see at least some sensitivities in your team working really hard to do what you can do. And I know you've got so many conflicting requirements, from code to structural to historic preservation to development to tenant requirements. So I know it's been a challenge, and I understand working around the clock on things like that. So thank you to the whole team. I think overall, understanding better today some of your limitations, which has driven your solution today, helps me understand and not just evaluate on paper, do I like the location and size of windows. I think holistically, it's a pretty good design for what we have to work with, and there's compromises taking any old building to current standards and making it into a useful facility. And obviously, it hasn't been in its set vacant for many, many years. So I understand the position of the Glendale Historic Society and appreciate also your bringing forward those concerns. I think over the next few months and meetings, looking at Phase 2 and Phase 3, we'll get a better idea of exactly where we're going on this. But I think today, if you need approval on the exterior stair, I think I understand why, and I understand that unfortunately that's kind of a compromise that we need to do to make the building useful, so I would support that. Overall, the window locations, I think although very different from what it was before. If I look back at the early building design and the use of the Masonic Temple determined those openings. So if we have to look at a building transforming, then today's use would help define those window locations. So I understand and appreciate you needing to change those. I think, although it's very difficult, I think, to do that in a way that's going to be cohesive with the old. I think it's done fairly simply, and I think you've been consistent in trying to make it distinguish old from new, and I appreciate that. So I can approve those today in the layout that they're in and the size that they're in, and would like to see the conditions that the staff has indicated in their report be as part of our approval. I think we do need some more information on details on windows and the infill, and if you can do a consistent solution for all the infill windows on all 3 facades, that would be my preference, and I think that would be something that I'd ask if you could try to achieve. Now again, you'll have to do probably more study on what is that and what does that look like, and can you retain windows and still meet the structural and the shear wall criteria. So if we can see that back either at your next presentation or through staff, that would be important to me. Let me just quickly scan through my notes. I think that's pretty much covers it, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan?
Great summation by Commissioner Shire. So I don't have anything really to add. She's added pretty much everything that needs to be said.
Thank you. You always say everything that needs to be said.
Too much sometimes, right?
So with that, I might just be repeating certain things, but in my mind, when I was looking at this project, I do recognize that again, we're focusing on windows, and that the window pattern or the lack of windows does in fact reflect the original intended use of the building, and that is an important historical clue to the building's function, and form follows function and all of that. But it is also the window pattern and the lack of windows that has made the building, dormant for almost 80 years. So I too welcome the opportunity for this building to be revitalized. And I'm comfortable with I am also comfortable with the window articulation on the north and the south and the east. For me, I know people have different aesthetic sensibilities, but for me, I think the regular placement and rhythm of the windows actually kind of makes them go away, as opposed to drawing more attention to them. There was one thing about the windows that has been bothering me as I've been looking at these drawings over and over again. I haven't been able to figure it out, but I think I finally might have figured out that I think there aren't the same number of panes on the top as the bottom of each of the window openings. And I don't know how my colleagues feel about that, but I don't know if regularizing that might just look a little squat on the bottom. I think there might be 5 panes on the top and 4 on the bottom, or 6 on the top and 5 on the bottom.
Yeah, I think it's differentiated because it looks like they need. What facade are you looking at? South?
I think the south and the north have. I have to go back through and count my.
I think
the south and the north have the same.
Spandrel glass, and the others are because the floor runs through there.
Yeah. Right.
So did I count those divisions incorrectly?
No, you counted them correctly.
I think Commissioner Bertanian, there are 5 lights vertically in the upper portion of each pair, and then 4
on the
lower window.
Right.
I don't know if that's.
To give a floor running.
So they have to be like that.
Yeah.
Oh.
I will reopen the public hearing, and you're welcome to come forward. Thank you.
Actually, the windows were identical on both the north and the south facades. In response to comments through our negotiation process with planning, we agreed on the south facade to take that spandrel glass that you see on the north facade and replace it with just the concrete beam that exists on those levels. That's actually where the mezzanine floor cuts through the windows. So that's actually just a simulated window appearance on the north facade. Staff
You
felt
just
that,
had to cut it somewhere because you don't have an even number.
Right.
And that's not, staff did ask to have the spandrel removed, but not to have the differential heights. If you were interested in remedying the problem, you might even get larger windows on the lower section if that was something the commission was interested in.
and we did look at that over the last couple of days in response to that comment. The answer to that is that it will require some additional strengthening of that beam that divides the two windows. It's basically, we'll be taking the lower window, sits about 3 inches above floor plate. So we'd need to take out that wall between the current sill and drop it down to floor plate level, which is possible. Everything's possible. But there's a cost associated with it, and it's a feasibility issue. If it's something that we certainly can look at it, but I need to understand with our structural engineer what level of effort is it going to take.
Okay. And again, if it's not something, I'm just putting it out there, if it's not something that is, my colleagues are interested in pursuing, then, well, thank you. And, maybe it's just the drawing that's bringing it out to my attention. I think, although I'm not familiar with the nano wall technology personally, I think I'm fine with it. Sounds like a good way to get some fresh air into the building. And I guess you'll be reviewing all of the fenestration, right, including...
Yeah, if
Okay.
you approve it, will be, and there's the possibility, given the timeline, that it could possibly come back to you if the details are ready then.
Oh, I also just had a quick question about the entrance. Do we know what material was before those doors were relocated from somewhere else?
Yeah, we
was
have
it
a
originally
photo. We have a
wood
historic
or-
photo in one of these
Are they there?
slides. They were wood and glass.
Yeah.
And we've heard, here you can see wood glass with a kind of a brass kick plate. The ironwork that you see here is all gone, so but the window configuration above appears to be close to the original configuration.
So the yellowed photo is the original.
Yes. Right.
And maybe this is just, maybe what we're looking at today is just for purposes of rendering?
Yeah,
But it looks a lot plainer than...
Yeah, the entry details will be brought to you at the Phase 2 hearing.
Okay.
So all of that will be worked out in more detail
Okay.
for your next
Okay,
round.
so we're not dealing with that today.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I think we talked about the tower, and that will be coming back to us, so we'll deal with that at the next meeting.
Yeah, tonight, though, you need to approve the presence of a tower in the location and relative, more or less the size that's proposed.
Okay. And I'm okay with that. I mean, again, I think we'll be talking about dimensions and everything at a future meeting. But I think I'm okay with it, and I think there is a suggestion for another building on the empty lot at some point in time. I think it won't be as tall as 9 stories, so the tower won't act as, I think, what's called a hyphen. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but it will stand out, but it seems that that has been a solution in other historic buildings, and I'm okay with it. So with that, someone like to make a motion, and
I'll make a motion.
okay.
So I move to approve today Phase 1 for the Masonic Temple at 234 South Brand, the stair tower on the exterior of the building, and the fenestration. And this would be in accordance with staff's conditions. And one added condition that staff is included in regular project meetings along the way, since the project is so fast-track.
There was one condition that I wrote down as I was taking notes that you entertained, that we don't have concurrence on, a consistent solution at all three facades.
Yes.
Is that
For windows.
Second.
Okay. Who's taking
Roll call.
Jay's probably taking a roll.
just give me a second?
Sure.
Doing two jobs at once.
I know.
Okay. Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Chair Vartanian,
Yes.
3-0 to approve with conditions.
Thank you. Thank you all.
very much.
We look forward to seeing the rest of the project.
Bring it back alive.
Okay.
We have a 5-minute break.
You like that?
I gotta go.
I'm going to call a 5-minute recess.
Seems appropriate.
No problem.
Want to sit here? Yeah.
Okay, for anyone who is just joining us, we are resuming the commission meeting. We just took a 5-minute recess, and we're going to move on to item 8B under new business, which is 1125 Hillcroft Avenue, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. I will go to Jay Platt, or to actually
To Eileen Babachani.
for the staff report.
Okay.
Wait, is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. I hope we can get home today before 9. Hopefully.
Help us achieve that.
Yeah, I'm going to have a very brief presentation. So this is a nomination application and Mills Act application for 1125 Hillcroft Avenue. This house is a contributor to the Rossmoyne Historic District and located at the intersection of Rossmoyne and Hillcroft. The house designed in a Spanish colonial revival style and built in 1926 by Nelson Brothers, a local construction firm for Warner family. The house is a 2-story house and sit on a sloping lot. The main entrance to the house is facing Hillcroft, and the house features and rough texture stucco on the exterior walls, red clay tile heaped roof with shallow eaves and exposed rafter tails around. And also there is an attached garage at this side. One of the other features at the first floor facing Hillcroft is a partial porch with wood bracketed pillars. You can see in this picture. Fenestration throughout the house include wood double hung windows, casement windows, wood casement windows, and picture windows, and also a slider windows at the kitchen at the rear of the house. According to the re-roofing permit in 1991, the old tiles have been used again, and based on the applicant's additional research on the tiles and also the old photographs of the house, it seems that the entire roof with rounded terminal and funnels look original. And rear of the house features a 3-story volume, including terrace, tower, basement, and also some non-original feature like a stone staircase, deck, a pool area, and also enclosed garden. You can see some wrought iron works in this house in this slide. So to be eligible in for Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and the applicant suggests that the second property owner, Dr. Solon, is significant. So it might be, the applicant suggests that it's potentially significant under that criteria, under criteria 2, but the level of his contribution to the medical history doesn't rise to the level that we can make this house eligible for designation under criteria 2. And also, none of the other owners of the house appear to have contributed significantly to local, state, or national history. Also, the applicant suggested that the house is significant under criteria 5, and they are suggesting that the house is one of the early example of the house in Rossmoy Tract. Based on criteria 5, the proposed historic resources must be one of the early heritage of the city. So in 1926 to 1927, there were around 99 houses in Rossmoy Tract. So this is one of these houses, not one of the houses throughout the city that we can consider as an early heritage of the city. So none of these two make this property eligible for designation under criteria 2 and 5. And this is one of the old photographs of the Rossmoy Tract with this house here, probably 1926-7. And for the criterion 3, the proposed historic resources must embody the distinctive and exemplary characteristic of an architectural style or type, period, or method of construction. But staff believes that this house doesn't qualify for designation under this criteria because of some major alteration and addition to this house. So I'm going to explain this alteration very fast. So one of these addition is a front entry porch roof, which is facing Hillcroft. This is an old picture from 1915, and this is the existing condition, and you can see how it changed the appearance of the front facade from this side. And here in this photo, you can see that the roof of this porch extended from the original roof of the living area. This is another picture showing the house in 1920s, and this is the existing appearance. And you see that this porch roof covered almost like these 3 arched windows at the front. The other alteration throughout the house is a window replacement. There is a permit in 2001 showing that 20 windows have been replaced in this building. Some of them are at the front, some of them are at the rear of the house. For the front, originally the house had wood double-hung windows, and you see how this hung window changed to wood casement window. The casement window are appropriate to the style of the house, but they don't retain the original window operation and are less recessed than compared to the original windows. In this photo, you can see that there were another window which failed now and they're not here anymore. So those are changes on the windows at the front facade. And also, this portion between the second story wings has been infilled. And also the window became larger comparing to the original one. And whatever is left from that alteration is covered with a tile roof. At the rear, the large open terrace here was infilled with living area and another terrace, and this alteration is visible from the Rossmoy because this house sits on the intersection of the Rossmoy and Hillcroft, and this addition has negative impact on this tower. It's kind of covering this tower. Some other alteration is addition of this sliding window for the kitchen. Probably this window is new here. And there are some other typical alteration and addition at the rear of the house, which is a pool area retaining concrete retaining wall, which for this age of this kind of properties is normal. And facing Rossmoy, there were 3 leveled stone retaining wall originally. Now one of these retaining wall at the lower part remains. And going back to the stucco, exterior walls stucco, staff believes that the stucco applied on the exterior walls does not seem to be original. We don't see the texture stucco, which is the result of a hand applying method on the walls. This texture is closer to be a machine applied plaster rather than hand plaster. And you see the piece of the plaster here. And closer view. This is the rear of the house. That was the front of the house. And again, rear of the house facing east at the lower part of the tower. And at the end, staff believe that this property is a good example of the Spanish colonial revival style house, and that's why it's a contributor to the Rossmoy Historic District, because it still has a many character defining feature of its style, but because of alteration and addition to this house, the house doesn't retain its historic and architectural integrity anymore. That's why staff doesn't believe that this house is qualified for designation in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources under any of these criteria. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. We'll open the public hearing, and I have 2 cards. I have Colleen Novak and Vanessa Withers. Who would like to go first?
Hi, I'm Vanessa Withers. As far as the PowerPoint, do you have the...
Yeah, if you take the,
Yeah, sure.
give her the keyboard and use those arrow keys.
I'll be brief. I know it's been a long night. So I am the founder of Historic Preservation Partners, and my primary job is that I work with homeowners to assist them with their historic residences, and that is in landmarking and Mills Act applications. And I'm a graduate of USC, and it was the Historic Preservation program when I went through it, but now Heritage Conservation. And I want to emphasize that I understand staff's recommendation based on their findings, but we do have some additional information that may, change your mind as far as the recommendation. I won't go into the history because I know you've heard this already. The owner says that both of the retaining walls are still there. They are just covered in foliage. And I think the issue here really is, does the property retain its ability to convey its historic significance? Because I think it is a significant contributor to the district, and its placement, I think, with some TLC really could be, a shining landmark for Glendale. And I really want to, as a preservationist, encourage homeowners to enter into this process because it is a commitment. And this homeowner, I did her other house in Pasadena where they entered into the Mills Act and, started on that scope of work. And what's nice about this house is that some of the alterations on the front facade are quite reversible. And, the owner is open to that if that makes a difference as far as, the visual impact of what has changed over time. A lot of the window replacement and the alterations that we're speaking of happened around 2000 to 2005 when it was owned by a real estate business person who obviously, was approaching the building in a different manner than my client would. And I think that we really should give this building a shot because I think it does have a lot of character-defining features intact. And we have been going around window by window and trying to evaluate sort of the situation. But as far as replacement, it was wood for wood. So, I don't think it was sort of an egregious offense. And the rear side of the house gets a lot of sun. So I think that was, I don't want to put too much conjecture into it, but I think that was maybe a reason for the switch out to a dual pane wood sash window to maybe try and alleviate some of that heat coming into the house. So there are some really unique features to this house that are still intact, and even though we have this roof covering the front porch structure, the windows in that porch are still intact and are still there. And then on the side facade, this arch window with the side lights, that's intact. And I know that we're not looking at interiors, as some other cities consider interiors. This property does have, the wood floors inside, batchelder tile. I think if we're looking at holistically, I think it is an exemplary Spanish colonial revival residence and an excellent contributor to the district. I don't want to repeat too many pictures, but so looking here, these are sort of the elements on the front facade that we believe are quite reversible. And here's some of the research that was done into the roof. And this is from a book that a gentleman who specializes in historic roofing, he goes through and catalogs Gladding McBean's and some of the other manufacturers. And so we do have Gladding McBean tile on the roof. And it is still available to get this tile pattern, and it's shown in the book as being available in this time period, and it shows sort of some of their other options that someone could choose if they were going to them as a manufacturer. And you can see some of the roof detailing, the terminals, that sort of thing. And you can see the house up on the hill. Obviously, you don't get the same view today. It's up and to the right. And so, previous owners, there have been 5 previous owners. There was one owner who was there for a very long time, and the present owner has been in contact with them, just trying to figure out, sort of the stucco issue, what has happened with that. They don't remember it ever being restuccoed. My sense is that, at some point there was some stucco maintenance. We don't know how much. There are other parts of the building that have a rougher finish stucco, and the assessor lists something, plaster with a jazz finish. So I don't know how we identify what a jazz finish is, but that's listed in the assessor's initial record when they inspected the building. And again, on this sort of what we're calling the rear facade, which is, kind of the hillside side, we have what was a 425 square foot addition, which enclosed most of this exterior patio. Not all of it, but most of it. And if I try to think of it, if I were reviewing this project or working with a homeowner, if they are adding square footage, we usually encourage the rear. And so even though it does change the look of this facade somewhat, I don't think it really destroys this property's ability to convey its significance. And the kitchen windows, those are replacements. That was done as part of a kitchen renovation, as part of this sort of more recent previous owner's work. And the new owner who purchased recently is really committed to making design decisions that, bring it closer to what it originally looked like. Changes to stucco. We've had numerous stucco professionals out, and there's no sort of. We think that it is probably not completely original stucco, because there have been additions. So obviously there has been some blending. There has been some work done. The building was completely covered in vines when my client purchased it, and so she's been trying to carefully remove those. And so the stucco is still kind of out there as far as how much it bothers you that it's not completely original stucco from 1926. This is a photo of basement stucco finish throughout that's thought to be original. So you can see it does have some pebbling and some texture to it. It's not a completely smooth finish.
And just to clear, that's exterior or interior?
No, that's interior. And then this is a sample of the stucco from the building. And our thought is that even though there have been some alterations and some window replacement, we feel that some of the things that are really sort of bothersome are very reversible, and our client is willing to entertain some of those things if you feel that would elevate it to the level of landmark status. And some of these things were actually part of our rehabilitation plan in looking forward to the Mills Act and kind of embarking on this work. But it is a significant scope of work to undo, a lot of things that a previous owner has done. So they're committed to the process, and they're preservation-minded owners. So if there is any way you can see that this property maybe still does convey significance, we would appreciate that. I do have the owner here, and she'd like to speak.
Thank you.
Oh, do you have any questions for me?
I don't.
Not at this time.
Hi. My name is Colleen Novak. As Vanessa mentioned, we previously owned a home in Pasadena, a 1929 English revival home, which was also under the Mills Act. And one of the reasons why we're interested in this program is because we've always wanted a historical home and have always wanted to restore and preserve. As soon as we walked into this house, we immediately knew that it was something that was unique and special. And I think when we discovered these photos from 1926 and 1929, I think it confirmed that. I don't know if there are very many homes that were. I know there were over 100 homes built in that time frame, but I'm not sure there are many that we actually have photographs of during the process. There are more photos in this series that actually show the building process and show from the property into the area, and where there are very limited homes there. So I know there have been changes to the home. We are wanting to work with you to preserve that. We want to get it back to its original beautiful elements. Within reason, of course. I guess I can go into detail about everything that Vanessa said. I don't want to take any more of your time. But with the stucco, the piece that I'm holding in that photograph, that was the photograph is taken from underneath the home, right under. So it's exterior, it's interior, but it's from the exterior. Yes. So nothing's been touched from that. I don't know if that really matters. I know I have been, as Vanessa said, I've been in touch with the owners who lived there through the 50s. They're the ones that gave me the photographs of the pictures from the 50s. And they've maintained that there was nothing done to the home. And, from conversations that I've had with a few of you, if there was work done, it was done probably before they moved into that home. So in the 40s, so a very long time ago. And it's in beautiful condition. So the windows, we're willing to do work with them, but I think that they retain a lot of the integrity that's there. I think, the home, I feel, retains a lot of the integrity. We are willing to work with the Mills Act and with your direction, but I feel that this home, primarily because of the photographs that we have and the condition that the home is in, and it should be preserved. We want to own it for a long time, but we'd like to make sure that it's preserved moving forward. So if we move away from this home, to make sure it continues to be preserved as it deserves to be.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll close the public hearing. Go to comments from commissioners.
Well, I'd like to say the fact that I've ridden past this house as a little boy for many, many, many years. That was my way from where I lived on Royal Boulevard to my friend's house on Cordova. So I know the house intimately, and I do remember the pink Cadillac and the stone walls. So it's very beautiful. I mean, I liked it. I've liked it since '56 onward, but the problems are what the staff has outlined right at this moment. It's just that there are alterations. It has changed. It's a gorgeous house. I mean, it is a gorgeous house. It's been a gorgeous house since, like I said, since '56 when I first met it. My concerns are the changes, because it's not, Glendale has such a huge housing stock of this type of house that it almost has to be pristine for it to go on the GR. I'm not sure exactly what modifications you'd have to do to make it to that point, this thing, but you've got an incredibly beautiful house. So I'll just let some of the other commissioners say something and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you so much for bringing it before us. We always appreciate homeowners taking an interest in their homes and bringing us things for consideration. Without that, we can't even make a decision. So you do have a beautiful home, and it is absolutely a significant contributor to the district, and that's why it is labeled as a contributor. And then just for your comfort, the homes that are part of the historic district have that protection on them, so that you would have to be concerned in the future. Let's just say if it doesn't get approved today, your home still would be protected under that historic district. Any modifications or anything would have to come before this commission or before the historic preservation staff to make any of those, future modifications. Yeah, I really concur with what Commissioner Morgan said, is that we do have such a large pool of beautiful Spanish homes that to have something arise to the exemplary example of the Spanish colonial revival style really needs to be very, very pristine and very original. And so with the substantial modifications from facade and windows, front porch overhang, balconies filled in and changed, very contemporary, pool in the exterior. Oh, the stucco, which I believe, when I looked at it, looks to be a texture coat finish, because it's actually peeling off. And typically they would have put that kind of textured appearance. My home had that, and we had to undo that. So with all of the changes, I think you should really just enjoy the amazing home you have for what it is. It's absolutely a contributor, and make all of those areas and modifications that probably fit your family really well. Just enjoy them and embrace them. I would say that I have to agree with the staff recommendation that it doesn't quite rise to the level of that original addition that would put it at the level of a Glendale Register property.
Thank you. I'll start by saying I'm sorry I didn't get to meet you on a visit to the house. I had a conflict, but I do live in the neighborhood. I did work on the Ross Moines Historic District, and I walk past your home frequently, and it is a very, very beautiful home. One of the, grand homes in the area. And I can't say anything much different. You probably are aware that for the Mills Act, we do take a 360-degree view of a property, and so we do look at all sides. This home is pretty much visible from all sides as it is, so there's not much of a backside to hide from the public view. But again, I think the changes to the roof, the windows, I didn't get to come and look. Wood for wood, I understand that. I understand that there has been, though, the operation is different, but also the placement of the new windows. I think the, what's the word I'm looking for? The recess is not as we would expect it in an original situation. And then the terrace enclosure, we tend to see a lot of sleeping porches that get enclosed over time, but it doesn't appear that was even a sleeping porch that already had a frame there, but a true open terrace that was enclosed. And I think it was pointed out by staff that does, to some extent, take away from that beautiful octagonal tower that once just sort of, projected from the side there. And as far as pools go, I know we often look at pools, and pools tend to be additions to historical properties over time, but I think one of the challenges also in dealing with pools, and often we don't get to see properties that have what looks like fairly much a brand new pool, but I think the design of this pool is rather incongruous with what might have been on the property during the period. And again, we do look at the entire property for the Mills Act. So I welcome you to the neighborhood. I thank you for taking interest in the property, and I will have to concur with my colleagues and the staff, and unfortunately deny the Mills Act, the designation, for the reasons we outlined.
Remember, the denial is a recommendation to City Council to deny the nomination. So.
Someone would like to make a motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion for the property at 1125 Hillcroft Road that the Historic Preservation Commission recommends to City Council that this property not be designated as a historic resource in the Glendale Register of Historic Properties, based on the alterations over the years, which are quite major and take away from the original historic fabric of the property.
Second?
I second.
Roll call. Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Chair Vartanian?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time.
It is a beautiful house.
Enjoy your home.
We will very much enjoy it.
All right, we have a few technical things we need to talk about, so probably next week, Eileen or I will call you. So.
Great.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, I have lost my agenda, but thank you.
One more,
We will
804.
move on to 8C, which is 804 West Kenneth Road, request from owner to modify Mills Act condition.
Okay, we're almost done, I think.
Oh.
Won't be much longer. Yeah. Yeah, I told you you didn't have to come first thing, but I could have told you to come later, but that's always dangerous. So. Okay, So we are considering a request from the owner of 804 West Kenneth Road to modify one of the conditions that was placed on the property as part of the Mills Act. The Mills Act was entered into at the end of 2011, and the conditions that had been imposed had a completion date of December 31st, 2013. And for a variety of reasons that the owner can share with you, it was very difficult for her to kind of fulfill some of these conditions. And also there was a sense in at least one of them that conforming to the condition would be a major effect on the way she uses the house, in particular the kitchen. So I put together a couple of slides just to show you the areas, to remind you of the house. At the corner of Highland and West Kenneth Road that has the great entry face. And the two conditions that the commission was very, very much like the house and put two conditions on. One, that this existing fountain be restored. When you toured the house, it was more or less in this condition with this terracotta urn in the center that we're not sure whether that was a fountain or not, but certainly not an original feature, but definitely there was a basin intended to hold water with some sort of water feature in the center, probably. And then there was a condition to look at some metal awnings that were on the house. This is the rear facade of the house. There's this kind of central courtyard area, and there are a number of existing awnings that are made of canvas that the commission thought were appropriate to the style of the house. There were two, and I don't have a good photo to show this, but this is kind of coming back around the corner toward the driveway. There were two metal awnings in place, one over a small window and then one over the areaway that covers kind of a walkway that enters into the kitchen. Mm-hmm. So here is, I don't have a better, nope, that's all I have. So, yeah, I did. It came too late, but it's pretty much the same as this picture that I'll show in a second. One of the issues, this is covering the stairs going up to the kitchen door, and Ms. Guerin's a cook and works professionally doing that and uses the kitchen a lot, and this is a ventilation fan to air out the kitchen. And I think she'll present to you that there was a thought that if this were either uncovered or a canvas awning, that the grease and whatever else is coming out of that might be an issue for her. She has voluntarily removed this smaller awning this week. So her request today is not for both awnings, but just to allow this metal awning to be retained in place. She's not making a specific request. She's agreed to continue her commitment to restore the fountain, but will be asking for an extension of time on that, and for personal reasons wasn't able to do this within the 2 years it was granted, which was a generous amount of time. Staff believes if you're inclined to grant some time, you should do so with the thought that we need to resolve this situation, not let it linger much longer. Here's the photo of the window with the awning that was removed. And then this is a new fountain, obviously in a very temporary installation with this extension cord, but I believe Ms. Guerin understands that this entire area needs to be part of the fountain as a basin for the water, and that the possibility of having a fountain in the center of that might be appropriate. Whether this is the appropriate fountain or not is something the commission can share with her. So that's all we have for the staff presentation. And if you didn't fill out a speaker card, April? Okay.
That's okay.
Not
Come
right
on
now,
up. You can do it afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm April Falzone-Guerin, owner of 804, and have loved this house and have lived there 21 years and have worked very hard to preserve the integrity of the architecture of this incredible Spanish colonial home. Honestly, I didn't know until recently, and due to some family parents being quite ill the last few years, 3 of them. It's like one after the other. It's taken a lot of my time and dedication to them. And it really just kind of time flew by. And I didn't realize it had taken this long, and I hadn't complied with what I needed to. And I was going through divorce at the time as well. And honestly, when we redid the kitchen, I had no idea that was there until really a few months ago. And it's apparent that the contractor never really properly finished it, according to what I see. My concern is walking up and down the stairs for anybody, children, people, guests. You know, I don't know what's going to be on that stairway, and I'm more concerned for safety. Now, I'm willing to go and find out what I need to do to make that properly installed, whatever it needs. I'm not sure, you know, I have to speak with the contractor on that. And if I have to remove the awning, I will. It's more for function than anything. It's kind of invisible. I forget it's even there. Nobody really sees it, but I will do whatever is necessary. And pertaining to the fountain, it has not been used in 21 years at least. Since we've had raised triplets there when they were young. We didn't think about putting water in that fountain or putting, the center part was empty. We just stuck that urn there, so it looked a little better. But after looking at it recently, and I just recently sent Jay some pictures, the plumbing and the electrical is so decayed and old. It's going to take, you know, some research and figuring out how we're going to make that work and what it's going to entail and cost, of course. So, you know, I'm willing to do it. It's just going to take some time, and I'm requesting that I be given a few more months to find out what all is needed and to take care of it. So, so I'm requesting more time if I can, to comply with these conditions.
How much time are you requesting?
3 months, if I may. And I'm working all the time, so it's not always easy and so forth.
How does California's drought affect the fountain?
And that's another thing. You know, it's not something I want to really be operating at this time, especially if will be implemented with penalties. I already have because of the size of the property. And I'm really trying to cut back, and we have gray grass, and so we'll get it functioning. How operational I'm going to keep it, only because of the water costs involved. I have to take that into consideration. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll close the public hearing. Go to discussion.
Well, I feel it's part of the Mills Act condition. That's part of why they get the discount. You know, so yes, it would have to be fixed, but practically, I mean, with Glendale going to have to be cutting back on the water. I mean, it may be fixed, but it never be used.
I mean, that could be the homeowner's choice, but at this point, if the Mills Act condition, I agree with my fellow commissioner that the tax savings, especially on a Mills Act property, is for continued restoration, improvement, preservation, and so all of the conditions that were put back in 2011. I'm not sure why, if the deadline was 2013, I guess staff has been granting extensions since then, and now it comes before us. Just remind me of what's happened between.
Yeah, when we've given you updates, we've told you that this one, there was a period where we had trouble communicating back and forth. There was certainly long extensions where we weren't actively pursuing it. We weren't thinking about it, and I'm sure the applicant was, or the owner wasn't also. It recently, in December, we were trying to find resolution before we came back to you with the Mills Act fulfillment discussion that we have every year, and we weren't able to make that happen. So through a series of delays, we're now at this hearing, and we're trying to work with Ms. Guerin to fix this. So.
Well, I have a couple comments. One, let's just talk about, we'll go back to the fountain in a minute, but let's talk about the vent for the kitchen. It looks to me like that really should have a vent pipe, which would be a pipe that would come out from the wall horizontally and then extend up, like a little, you know, smokestack kind of. So that would solve any problem. Nothing should be flying out of there, dripping anything on the stairs. I feel strongly about the metal awning that never would have been put on a house of this grandeur in that era. And so it's not appropriate to a house that's, one, this style that we've been granted on the register, that we've given the Mills Act property. So I feel strongly that all the conditions are upheld, that the fountain is working, and that it is in an appropriate design and style to the era. And if staff could give the applicant some examples, photos, recommendations, I think that might be helpful. What's currently in the middle is not appropriate to my historical
And
knowledge.
just to see what range of ideas the commission might entertain, this is the kind of basin that sometimes just has a simple pipe
Yes,
with a little bit
simpler
of water
bubbler.
just creating a little movement. So it could be a simple solution. Okay.
Very simple.
Yes.
All right.
And then sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I wanted to address time frame quickly because while we've missed, deadline after deadline, 3 months, in my opinion, is not enough time to order tile, get a fountain working, get a contractor out there, take them up. So I think, in my opinion, I'd be okay if all of these are remedied by the end of the year.
And
I would be okay granting that.
we can't put a more onerous condition on the situation, and the commission didn't ask to have the fountain retiled.
We
It
did.
was to be brought, let me read it, but my memory is that it was to be made operational. Perform all work necessary to make fountain at east facade functional. So,
But functional in the condition it might have been at the time? Or just plastered bottom, or?
I interpreted it at the time, and it made its way into the contract.
I apologize for saying tile if there
Yeah.
wasn't tile.
Yeah.
I would picture it being at least a finished operational fountain.
And we could work to achieve a more cosmetic
Thank you.
finish, probably not necessarily at the expense in time of tile.
Okay.
Just to be fair, based on
Yes,
what we
I
asked for.
appreciate that.
And then we'll definitely resolve a better kind of fountain situation. We'll make a clear note if your colleagues agree that this tiered fountain is not appropriate. So.
Right.
Green, actually, I too was alarmed or surprised to see the photograph because I recall it being tiled, but I guess it wasn't.
Yeah, this actually is the photo from the time of designation. So. Oh, I'm sorry. This one is April. You can't speak from the audience, so.
Okay, so
But
it
I'll
has
get your
tile.
points
Go back
out
to
there.
the
This
photo.
is the photo that the commission saw.
So it has tile on the face of those stairs, but then it ends just in a
Yeah.
concrete slab, because like that brick edge probably isn't original, and
No, things have happened to this tile. I assume the sprinkler equipment wasn't inside the basin, which may legitimately have to be removed as part of this process because I doubt the water went up to the edge here, and it is kind of an unusual condition. We could certainly make a site visit as part of the discussion about how to proceed, but I think ultimately our goal will have to be limited to functional fountain and as much as possible make it watertight and look good through coatings. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So do we
do you
need
have any
to?
comments?
Unless you want to
I
open the
don't-
hearing.
No, I'm fine. I think I concur. And do we need to officially take a
Make a
vote?
motion?
or
Well, it
anything,
just
or-
and you concur that the metal awning is inappropriate,
Yes.
and that either a canvas awning or no awning would be appropriate.
I'm
Yeah.
okay with
Can't
that.
we can't force the vent pipe, but that would be a solution if.
They're concerned about it.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
think
to
I heard
solve the
the
problem.
owner indicate that she would be willing to look for a solution, so.
Okay, so do you want me to read back the conditions?
Yes.
Sure.
Please.
So and then what time frame, are you still 1 year to end of the
Yes.
year?
Well, yeah, not 1 year, but December
Till
31st
December?
would be fine with me.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. That's fine.
Consistent with our regular
By the time she
Right.
gets
rhythm,
going.
so.
I'm fine with that, too.
Okay, so the commission may entertain a motion to grant an extension to the Mills Act contract fulfillments for the 2 conditions, one being the bringing the existing fountain back to functional status with an appropriate water feature at its center, and working with the applicant as best we can to kind of ameliorate the kind of ugly stucco that's in there right now. The second condition would be to remove the metal awning as originally proposed and either replace it with an appropriate canvas awning or to leave it without an awning. And then I suppose you're okay with the window that lost the awning and leaving that without an awning?
That's fine.
All right, so there's your motion.
Okay. Making the motion?
Do I make that again, or just say as so
Just say
stated?
it, just say as staff, yeah.
As staff stated, I
Okay.
make the motion.
I second it.
Okay, and roll call.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Chair Vartanian?
Yes.
Good. December 31st, 2015 we're in?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to also make it clear, though, that staff and the commission has been very generous with time extensions.
Yes.
And that we really see this completed by December 31st. And if not, there are penalties in the Mills Act that could be so imposed if the city chooses, I guess.
Yeah, for a property that either doesn't fulfill conditions at the initial state or that allows work to occur without permits, without approval, that diminishes the character of the property, the city has the ability to cancel the contract, which has a very substantial penalty attached to it that's administered by the state. It's 12.5% of the rental value, or not of the market value of the property. It's not invoked very often. Most people recognize that that's something not worth dealing with. So,
Right.
so we hope to resolve it without even stepping close to that. Although it's definitely out there.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is number 9, Planning Division updates and informational briefings. A is update on citywide commercial survey.
Yeah, we just want the commission and the public to know that we have not forgotten that the commercial survey is coming, and that we have pretty much written the RFP. We haven't issued it yet, and we've just recently decided to kind of step back the issuance so that we can just, as a group, not just as the preservation staff, there are a lot of people who would be involved in something like this, and we're trying to pace the level of work that will be associated. My sense right now, without promises, is the RFP would be issued either in May or June, with proposals coming back either in June or July, and then we'll move forward. It'll definitely. There's no reason that it won't be able to start moving forward in the second half of the year. That's our update.
Okay, I think we all look forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you.
8:10.